It starts off with a postman delivering letters. A dog collects a letter, brings it back indoors, and puts it on the kitchen table. A young boy called Nick is sitting at the table making an invention, while his sister Amy is on the phone. After she presses a button on the wall that says breakfast, we see the father, Wayne Szalinski, up in his attic working on a new invention. He sees the breakfast alarm going off, and sends a note downstairs from his computer, saying I'll be down in 5 minutes, and gets back to work. Next door to them is Russell Thompson, trying to sleep but he is being disturbed by the noise, and gets frustrated. He opens his window, and yells at him to give it a rest because it is Saturday. His wife May says to give him a break, and tries to calm him down, but he refuses and runs out the door. As he comes out, he spots his son Ronald in a tent, making some sort of contraption, and asks what he is doing because he is making it from his fishing rod. His son says don't move, but he walks straight through the string, sets the trap off, and ends up on the floor with a rubber arrow stuck to his head. Back to Wayne, Nick walks in trying to show him his own invention, but Wayne says he is busy and tells him to go and help his sister. We then see him testing his invention, which is supposed to shrink objects. He is using it on an apple, but it doesn't work and just makes the apple explode. He sits down in disappointment while his dog licks the apple juice off his face. Back at the Thompsons' house, Russell's elder son, who is also called Russell, wakes up looking grumpy, and slams the door in his dad's face. Russell Sr. asks May what's wrong with him, and she says that he's sad because he was cut from the football team. Over at the Szalinskis, they're all sat down eating breakfast. Amy asks Wayne if he got the machine to work. He lies and says yes, then realizes he is late for the conference, and rushes out the door. The mother, Diane, rings the house phone checking up on everyone, and wishes Wayne good luck at the conference. Wayne tells the kids to clean the house before their mother gets home later, and tells Nick to mow the lawn. Nick brings his friend Tommy round and walks into the backyard to show him one of his dad's inventions. It is a remote control lawnmower. He says if he gives him a box of cookies, he'll let him use it to mow the whole lawn. Tommy says he is busy, but wants to do it later, so they agree on that. Ronald from next door looks over the fence, and asks Nick if he wants to play baseball, but Nick says no. As Russell Jr. is helping his dad pack to go fishing, he spots Amy through the window dancing, and stops to have a look. Meanwhile, Ronald is in his backyard playing baseball. He swings the bat at the ball, and it flies through the air, smashing the window into Wayne's attic. The ball bounces around the room, lands on the machine, and it starts moving around shrinking objects. Russell Jr. saw it happen, so he grabs Ronald, and makes him go round to tell them and apologize. Nick takes Ronald upstairs to get the ball back, and as they walk in, the machine zaps them and they shrink. We then see Wayne at the conference, explaining his shrink machine. No one believes in him without proof, so they all leave the room. Amy and Russell Jr. come walking upstairs to the attic, but they can't find their brothers. The machine then zaps the two of them as well, shrinking them to smaller than an ant. All the kids run over to each other panicking, and the dog walks in barking. Wayne gets home, and starts calling for the kids as he can't find them. They hear him, and lift the sofa, which is also shrunk, and start carrying it towards the door. As he walks in, they all jump on the sofa screaming at him, but because they are so small, he doesn't hear a thing. He squats down to sit on his sofa, but ends up on the floor, as this is also shrunk too. He gets up, and says to himself, "Where's my couch?" He looks out the window, noticing the damage from the baseball, and throws a tantrum while smashing up his shrink machine. The kids run away trying to dodge all of the pieces flying off of it. Wayne then grabs a broom, and starts sweeping up the mess, but little does he know, his kids are with it. He scoops them up with a dustpan and brush, drops them into a bin, and walks down into the garden to throw away the rubbish bag. The kids use a shard of glass to cut through the bag, and as they pull it apart, they realize that they are now at the back of the garden. Ronald slides down a blade of grass, and calls for his brother to go with him. They all follow, and start walking around trying to figure out a way back to the house. A butterfly flies above them, so they all panic and run to cover. We then see Diane arrive home from work. She asks Wayne where the kids are, but he says he hasn't seen them since he left for the conference. Back to the kids, Nick realizes that their dog might be able to hear them, because dogs have good hearing. His plan is to whistle until he finds them, and take a ride on his back into the house. The dog hears them whistling, and barks at the door, so Wayne comes over to let him outside. Nick, Ronald, and Russell Jr. climb up the grass to get a better view. They spot their dog, but next door's cat comes hopping over the fence, and chases the dog back inside. Nick then loses his grip, and falls into a flower. Amy shouts telling him to get out of there, because he is allergic to pollen, but he realizes the pollen is too big to breathe in. so it won't affect him. May from next door asks Diane if she has seen her kids, but she says she can't find Nick and Amy either. A swarm of bees then come flying past, and one of them comes into the flower with Nick. It grabs hold of him, and starts to fly off. Russell Jr. quickly leaps on top of the bee to save Nick, and the bee zooms off into the air. They fly through the air screaming, holding on for dear life. Wayne goes back into his attic, and steps on a shrunken couch. He bends down in shock, realizing that his invention worked, but also worrying that he has possibly shrunk his kids. He crawls along the floor calling their names, and then realizes he swept the floor earlier and threw out the rubbish. He goes outside looking through the bins with a magnifying glass, only to find that they escaped the bag. He looks over at the garden because he now knows that they are lost in it. He climbs along the fence to get back to his house, because he doesn't want to step on the grass and squash them. Russell Jr. and Nick get up from the ground, as they ended up falling off the bee, but they have now split up with Ronald and Amy, and have to try to find them. Wayne comes outside wearing stilts and binoculars, treading carefully while looking in the grass for the kids. He accidentally steps on a hosepipe, causing it to turn the sprinklers on. The water comes splashing down on the kids, so they run away trying to dodge all the huge drops. Amy spots Nick and Russell Jr., and shouts his name right before falling off a ledge into a big puddle of dirty water. Russell Jr. leaps onto a small blade of grass, and slides down the mud to try and save her before she drowns. He carries her out of the water, and they all lay her down. She is unconscious, so Russell Jr. begins to give her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Luckily she wakes up, coughing out the water that she had swallowed, and cuddles her brother, who is relieved that she survived. We then see Wayne hanging over his lawn, still in search for his kids. Back to the Thompson family, Russell Sr.'s friend turns up to go fishing, but he tells him he isn't going to make it, giving a false excuse that his wife isn't feeling too well. Back to the kids, Amy asks Ronald for a truce, and shakes his hand whilst putting mud all over it. They find a giant cookie, run over to it, and stuff their faces. A massive ant turns up, so they run off and hide under some grass, but they change their mind, and try to attack the ant instead. Amy has a different plan, and lures it off with a chunk of cookie, in order to try and tame it. Meanwhile, the dog jumps up and bites the rope that Wayne is hanging from, and spins him around. He lets go, causing Wayne to spin around in circles, and fly off into the neighbor's swimming pool. Amy's plan worked, so all the kids hitch a ride on the back of the ant, while dangling the chunk of cookie in front of it, making it walk. Back at the house, Diane pulls up, and notices a police car next door at the Thompsons, so she gets worried and runs indoors to call the police herself, reporting her kids as missing. We then see the Thompson family in their house talking to the police, also reporting their kids missing. The police leave, and receive the other missing children report, which is only next door. Wayne comes rushing down telling Diane that the kids are in the backyard, but they have shrunk. The police ring the doorbell asking about the missing kids, but Wayne tells them not to worry as they are in the backyard, right before Diane faints. Back to the garden, Ronald hops off the ant, and feeds it some cookie for a recharge. They then decide to let the ant go, as it is probably tired, but it doesn't want to leave, and just keeps following them. Russell Sr. steps outside for a cigarette, and sees Wayne and Diane hanging above the grass, looking around with their headlamps on. He flicks the end of his cigarette over the fence, and large pieces of hot ash come flying down over the kids. They run over to see what it was, and find the huge burning cigarette. Ronald grabs a twig, and sticks it into the end of the cigarette, creating a torch. Wayne and Diane see the Thompsons arguing through their window, and they decide that it is best to go and tell them what has happened to their kids. They don't believe them, until he shows them the shrunken couch under a microscope. Russell Sr. is furious, and him and May storm out the room. The kids explore the garden with their torches, and find a big piece of Lego. They climb into the holes, and get some rest for the night. Out of nowhere, a huge scorpion shows up, trying to attack them. They climb out of the Lego, and run for their lives, but Ronald can't get out, because the scorpion corners him in the hole. Russell Jr. distracts the scorpion by throwing the torches at it, while Ronald escapes. The ant then comes running up from behind, and grabs the scorpion by the leg. The scorpion turns around and starts attacking the ant, cornering it into a blade of grass. It then picks up the ant, and throws it. The kids come running over and start poking the scorpion with twigs, until it finally retreats. They then run over to the ant, and realize that it is hurt. Ronald starts crying, as he had a bond with it, and even named it Andy. The morning comes, and the kids wake up. Nick's friend Tommy comes walking into their garden, as he is back to mow the lawn. He picks up the remote control, and gets ready to start cutting. The kids hear a noise, they look up, and realize that it is a lawnmower. They run around the garden trying to escape it, and luckily find a tunnel in the mud, created by an earthworm. Wayne and Diane hear the lawnmower, and run into the garden to stop Tommy. As he stops it, the blades are spinning right above the tunnel the kids are in, creating a big gust of wind pulling Nick towards it. They all grab hold of each other to try and stop it from pulling him in, but they lose grip, and go flying out of the tunnel. Luckily, they miss the blade, and land back onto the ground. They look up, and see Wayne and Diane. They start screaming at them, but they are all too small for them to hear. Their dog comes sniffing through the grass, and all the kids grab hold of his hair. He runs back inside, hops on the kitchen table, and Nick falls off, landing in Wayne's cereal. Wayne dips his spoon into the cereal, and as he is about to take a mouthful with Nick in it, the dog bites his leg to stop him. Wayne then looks through his magnifying glass, and finds Nick swimming in the milk, and also spots the rest of the kids. He goes back into the attic, and starts fixing the shrink machine, so he can reverse them back to normal size. They need someone to test it on, so Russell Sr. volunteers. He sits in front of the machine, gets shrunken, and then zapped again, which reverses it. Now that they know it works, all the kids stand in a line holding hands, before being zapped back to normal size. They all hug their parents, and show their appreciation for each other. Please make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications so you never miss a recap. Thanks for watching.